Challenges will undoubtedly rise. But if there's one thing that I've learned in my life, it's that meaningful change never comes easily.
When Prince Harry stepped onto the stage at the prestigious Envision 2025 summit in Shanghai, he likely expected applause, maybe even admiration. Instead, he was met with silence, a room full of powerful figures glued not to his words, but to their glowing phones. Some scrolled, some typed, others quietly stood and left. It wasn't just awkward, it was devastating. And as the speech unfolded, it became painfully clear. The world is no longer listening. This was supposed to be a comeback. A rebranding. A declaration that Harry, once a royal rebel, had found his voice as a global thought leader. But what was meant to be a landmark moment of reinvention turned into a brutal reality check. The Duke of Sussex didn't deliver a compelling vision for the future. He delivered a lecture that nobody wanted to hear. What happened in Shanghai wasn't just a poorly received keynote, it was a moment that revealed just how far Prince Harry has fallen, from beloved royal to background noise in a room of world leaders. The event had all the makings of a PR triumph. Held in one of the world's most influential economic hubs, the Envision 2025 summit gathered diplomats, tech giants, environmental strategists, and political leaders to discuss the future of innovation and global cooperation. It was a place where ideas shaped policy and voices sparked change. Into this arena walked Prince Harry, armed with a teleprompter and a message about sustainable travel. But before he could even finish his first paragraph, the message was already evaporating. Eyewitnesses in the room described the moment as surreal. Dozens of attendees began pulling out their phones, not to record the prince's speech, but to check emails, scroll through social media, or respond to texts. One delegate told reporters, "It was the most awkward silence I've ever experienced at a global event." There was no applause, no engagement, no visible reaction. The Duke of Sussex may as well have been invisible. For someone whose entire brand relies on relevance, it was a crushing blow. The speech itself didn't help. Instead of offering data, new ideas, or actionable solutions, Harry leaned on recycled phrases, buzzwords like digital equity, global empathy, and healing through connection. It sounded more like a TED Talk from 5 years ago than a vision for 2025. No fresh insights, no personal stories, no real substance, just vague sentiments that drifted into the air and landed nowhere. One attendee reportedly quipped, "It felt more like an ad campaign than a keynote address." The backlash was swift and brutal. Chinese media outlets, typically cautious in tone, didn't hold back. Several called the speech tone-deaf, uninspiring, and out of touch with regional issues. Online forums lit up with sarcasm and disbelief, questioning why a man with no formal background in international policy, climate science, or economics was given a platform at such a high-level event. One editorial remarked, "Prince Harry arrived with a royal name, but left with little else." Back in the UK, even longtime royal commentators couldn't mask their disappointment. One described Harry's tone as LinkedIn motivational speaker meets celebrity brand ambassador. Another was harsher. It was like watching someone try to pitch spiritual healing to a boardroom of economists. But if the speech was a disaster, Meghan Markle's absence added another layer of intrigue. The couple has long presented a united front, appearing side by side at galas, interviews, and charity events. Yet at Envision 2025, Meghan was nowhere to be seen. No social media post, no behind-the-scenes photo, no supporting statement. Nothing. Was it a scheduling conflict, or was it something more deliberate? Critics began to speculate that Meghan, ever image-conscious and fiercely strategic, may have predicted this would be a reputational sinkhole and chose to stay far away. Her silence afterward only fueled the rumors. In an era where every digital gesture is scrutinized, her complete disengagement was louder than any speech Harry gave. And while the cameras were focused on Harry's stiff delivery and the sea of distracted faces in the audience, another shadow was trailing him, one tied to scandal rather than speeches. The Invictus Games, long a centerpiece of Harry's post-royal legacy, were reportedly facing financial scrutiny. Don Lindsay, the chair of the Games, had allegedly brought in legal counsel to investigate potential mismanagement of funds. Though Harry hasn't been accused of any wrongdoing, the whispers were already circling in the halls of the summit. This wasn't just tabloid noise. These concerns came from within the non-profit world, where transparency is sacred and trust is currency. And once that trust is broken, not even a royal name can patch it up. The timing couldn't have been worse. Delegates familiar with the controversy murmured quietly during Harry's speech, questioning whether the man on stage was really the right person to lecture the world on accountability, innovation, or ethics. What Envision 2025 exposed wasn't just a bad speech, it was a brand in decline. Brand Sussex, once hailed as bold, modern, and refreshing, now looks adrift. Spotify walked away. Netflix is reportedly reconsidering. Public enthusiasm is thinning out. Every venture feels more like a salvage operation than a step forward. And the speech in China didn't just fail to halt that decline, it accelerated it. Even Harry's legal troubles seem to echo this downward spiral. Just days before the summit, his phone hacking claim against the publisher of The Sun was thrown out of court. The judge ruled that Harry had waited too long to file and found no proof of the secret agreement he claimed had delayed him. The timing couldn't have been worse. One more blow to his credibility, one more distraction, one more reason for critics to roll their eyes and move on. The irony is painful. This was supposed to be a moment of transformation, a global summit, a chance for Harry to step onto the world stage and command attention not as a prince, but as a leader. Instead, the event became a mirror, reflecting back everything critics have said for years. That without the royal machine behind him, Harry's message lacks clarity. That without real preparation or expertise, he falls back on slogans. That without Meghan beside him, even his confidence seems to falter. But perhaps the most brutal assessment didn't come from Meghan's absence was more than a logistical detail, it was a strategic silence. For a brand so reliant on image, optics, and coordinated messaging, her decision not to attend, not to comment, and not to post was deafening. She's been through enough PR disasters to know when something is burning before the smoke is visible to the public. And this time, it seems she chose to evacuate early. Insiders close to the Sussex camp reportedly described a crisis mode atmosphere in the hours following the summit. Meghan, furious over the speech's poor reception, allegedly instructed her team to pivot immediately, away from policy stages, away from unpredictable media reactions, and towards safer terrain. More Netflix premieres, more curated appearances, more events where applause is guaranteed. It was the clearest sign yet that Brand Sussex, for all its talk of global leadership and advocacy, may be quietly retreating to what it knows best: controlled. Narratives, entertainment crossovers, and lifestyle branding. Think less Mandela and more Goop, less UN keynote, more celebrity panel moderated by Oprah. Not because they've given up, but because the world has stopped buying what they're trying to sell. International outlets, especially in Asia and Europe, didn't hold back. One Chinese editorial described Harry's speech as a presentation of privilege masquerading as purpose. Another mocked his TED Talk in neutral tones, pointing out how ill-suited he seemed for a summit, rooted in policy, economics, and forward-thinking tech. Even neutral commentators questioned the legitimacy of his invitation. If Harry was there to inspire, then who exactly walked away inspired? The Envision 2025 summit, filled with some of the brightest minds in innovation, didn't need another celebrity. It needed visionaries. And in the midst of AI breakthroughs, climate solutions, and geopolitical insight, Prince Harry stood on stage trying to sell empathy like it was a brand. To many in the room, it didn't just fall flat. It felt hollow. And as if to pour salt in an already stinging wound, that same week saw another legal setback for the Duke. A judge threw out his phone hacking case, calling it not credible, and dismissing the idea of a secret agreement between the royal family and the Sun's publisher. It wasn't just a personal loss, it was a public one. Another reminder that the world, from courtrooms to conferences, is starting to question the substance behind the Sussex name. This slow, painful unraveling of influence is no longer theoretical. It's visible, tangible, measurable in the silence of an audience, in the headlines that shift from curiosity to criticism, in the growing number of deals that fizzle out before they begin, and the most sobering part? The Sussexes still carry. Titles still attract attention, still draw clicks, but clicks don't equal respect. And that's what's vanishing. There was a time not long ago when Prince Harry could command a room simply by walking into it. He was the soldier prince, The grieving son turned mental health advocate, the royal who broke tradition in the name of authenticity. But authenticity is no longer enough, and without the institutional weight of the monarchy behind him, the cracks are showing. The summit in Shanghai wasn't an isolated failure. It was the latest chapter in a pattern. The pattern of entering arenas unprepared, of over-promising and under-delivering, of confusing celebrity with credibility. And it left the world with a clear, if uncomfortable, conclusion. Prince Harry's post-royal identity is in free fall. The whispers at the summit weren't about innovation or new ideas. They were about the Invictus Games scandal, about a missing Meghan, about a speech that felt more like filler than future. And perhaps most telling of all, they were about why anyone thought this man belonged on that stage in the first place. And the audience wasn't cruel. They weren't hostile. They were just indifferent. And in a world where indifference is deadlier than criticism, that indifference speaks volumes. It wasn't rage that greeted Harry. It was disinterest. And that's far harder to recover from. By the time the summit ended, there were no trending hashtags, no viral moments, no stirring quote to be replayed on news cycles or TikTok feeds, just a smattering of polite nods and a slow, quiet exit. For a man once at the center of global attention, it was the ultimate anticlimax. For anyone watching closely, the Envision 2025 summit wasn't just another media hiccup, it was a metaphor. A global gathering meant to showcase the future, where Prince Harry came to speak but ended up symbolizing something else entirely. What happens when a legacy loses its grip, and a platform once built on duty becomes a stage for slogans? It wasn't just that his words failed to move the room, it's that they barely registered at all. In a summit where innovation meant policy precision, measurable targets, and actionable frameworks, Harry brought none of those. He brought broad appeals for compassion, vague mentions of his foundation, and reminders that change takes time. But the world isn't waiting anymore, and maybe that's the hardest part for the Duke of Sussex to accept. Influence isn't permanent. It must be earned and re-earned with substance, relevance, and authenticity. Without those things, even royalty becomes background noise. And in that room in Shanghai, with hundreds of global minds focused on building tomorrow, Prince Harry's message became exactly that: background noise. His speech didn't just fail because of a disinterested crowd, it failed because it exposed the gap between image and impact. Because in 2025, ideas win, not titles. And that summit reminded the world that Harry's title alone is no longer enough. What's left now is damage control. Meghan's PR strategy is already pivoting. Friendly outlets are spinning the speech as a misunderstood humanitarian appeal. But the global headlines tell another story. Underwhelming, disconnected, irrelevant. These are not words that vanish easily, and behind the media frenzy is a deeper truth. Once you lose credibility on a stage like Envision 2025, it's hard to get it back, because the people in that room aren't just spectators, they're leaders. They shape policy, they influence governments, they drive technology, innovation, and diplomacy. And when they stop listening, it sends a signal far beyond the venue's walls. The prince who once walked behind his mother's coffin with the weight of a nation on his shoulders is now struggling to find footing on a world stage. That demands more than charisma. And as that stage continues to evolve, it's becoming clearer by the day. Prince Harry isn't evolving with it. What's most haunting isn't the speech itself, it's the silence that followed. No follow-up questions, no media frenzy, no hallway buzz, just a slow fade into irrelevance. For a man whose greatest fear has long been invisibility, this wasn't just a misstep. It was a moment of reckoning, and maybe that's the message the world took away. Not from his words, but from the room's response. The world isn't interested in royal nostalgia wrapped in modern platitudes. It's looking for clarity, for courage, for action. And Prince Harry, for all his passion and presence, didn't deliver any of that. Now, as critics circle and supporters scramble to reframe the narrative, one question remains. Can Prince Harry still matter on the global stage without the crown, the applause, or the institution behind him? Or has the world simply moved on? Maybe it's not the scandals that will undo Brand Sussex. Maybe it's the silence, the yawns, the glowing phone screens, the polite exits. Maybe that's the new reality for a man who traded duty for deals and now finds the spotlight far dimmer than he ever expected. Because influence isn't inherited, it's earned. And in Shanghai, the world just showed Harry exactly how little he has left. But what do you think? Was this just a bad day for the prince, or a sign of something deeper, something irreversible? Drop your thoughts below. Because whether you're cheering for a comeback or watching the decline unfold, one thing is certain: the world is watching. And this time, it didn't clap.